She was inside equipment locker 7 when I found her, and she had been there long enough that the cold had got into her fingers, was pulling salvage from the collapsed east wing of the Karis Pale labor camp. 3 days after the tunnel failure, after the Keith's Compact site supervisors had certified the casualty list and pulled their personnel, and left the rest of us to clean up residual debris. I had a pry bar and a work lamp, and no particular expectation of finding anything alive. The Velottary workers had all been accounted for on the Compact's manifest, was the Compact's of saying they had been counted and declared lost, and the debt had been administratively transferred to the surviving. I did not know at the time that a surviving family line was crouched in locker 7 with her knees pulled to her chest and one small hand pressed flat against the inside of the door. She pushed back when I pulled the handle. "That was what told me," I said, in the flat trade pidgin that passes for a common language on the frontier moons, that I was not going to hurt her. I said it twice. Then, I opened the door the rest of the way slowly and held the work lamp so she could see my face, and she looked at me with eyes the color of old amber, enormous in that pale violet face, and she did not move toward me, and she did not move away. She was small, thin in the way that made me think the camp's food allocation had not been generous. She had on a worker's coverall 3 sizes too large, cinched at the waist with a piece of cable, and she was holding something against her chest. A small, carved figure, smooth riverstone, that I later understood had been her mother's. I sat down on the floor of the collapsed corridor so that I was not standing over her. We stayed like that for a while. When she finally came out of the locker, she took hold of 2 fingers of my left hand, and she did not let go. I walked her back to my hab unit that way, her hand around my fingers, and I want to be precise about this because it matters. I did not think of it as a decision at the time. It was simply the next thing to do. The way you put your hand out when someone is about to fall. Keith's Compact's debt broker arrived at my door inside the hour. His name was Solvith, and he was the kind of man the Compact employed specifically because he could make the presentation of legal paperwork feel like something heavier. He had 2 enforcers behind him, not in the doorway yet, just visible. He told me the child was a registered labor asset under Compact Frontier, Indenture Code 7-4, that her family's debt had a remaining balance of 11 years contracted labor, that the balance transferred by statute to surviving dependents, and that I was in possession of Compact property, and he would like her returned, peaceably. I looked at the documents. They were real. The Compact was very good at real documents. I said I would need to review the relevant Frontier Homestead statute before I could respond, and I closed the door. He knocked again in 20 minutes. I did not answer. The child was sitting on my bunk, eating the only thing I had in the unit that seemed like it. Work. Dried fruit, the kind I bought for long shifts because it kept. She ate carefully, like someone who had learned not to trust that there would be more. She watched me move around the small space. When I sat down at the comm terminal, she came and stood beside me, close enough that her shoulder touched my arm, and she watched the screen without asking what I was doing. What I was doing was filing. The Frontier Homestead statute on Karis Pale was a piece of legislation so old and so rarely invoked that the Compact's lawyers had apparently not to close it. Under subsection 14, a registered frontier laborer in continuous settlement residence, which I had been for 6 years, file a dependent ward declaration for any minor found in hazardous abandonment within the settlement boundary. The declaration created a provisional legal relationship that superseded debt transfer claims pending adjudication by the Colonial Settlement Authority, which had an office on the nearest hub station approximately 9 days transit away. It took me 4 hours to find the right forms, fill them correctly, and transmit them with confirmation receipts to 4 separate administrative addresses. The child fell asleep against my arm sometime in the 3rd hour. I did not move her. In the morning, Solvith came back with a 3rd enforcer and a bounty designation that he said superseded the ward filing on grounds of active debt collection. I told him through the door that I had forwarded his arrival and the bounty designation to the CSA office, along with my filing timestamp, and that, If the compact's enforcers entered a registered dependent ward domicile under a contested bounty claim, they would be doing so in violation. 3 separate frontier protection codes, and that I had the names of the enforcers and had logged them. There was a pause. Then he said he would return when the matter was adjudicated. He did not return that day, or the next. On the 3rd day, I knocked on my neighbor Pell's door and told him what was happening. Pell was a hauler like me, older, who had been on Karis Pale longer than anyone and had opinions about the compact that he did not bother to moderate. He listened without interrupting. Then he went and talked to Marsh and Orphan, the other 2 haulers on the East Residential Strip. I want to be careful here about how I describe what happened, because there is a version of this story where it sounds larger than it was. It was not large. It was 4 men who had spent years working the same cold moon and had no particular love for the Keithys compact, and one of them had a small alien child in his HAB unit who had not yet told him her name, but had taken to sitting beside him in the mornings while he drank his coffee, close enough to share warmth. Solvith came back on the 4th day with papers he said overrode the adjudication hold. I opened the door. Behind me, in the narrow space of my HAB unit, Pell was sitting at the table. Marsh was leaning against the back wall. Orphan was in the doorway to the side room. None of them said anything. They were just there, the way men are there when they have decided to be. The child was beside me. She had my 2 fingers again. Solvith looked at the papers in his hand. He looked at the 4 of us. He was doing a calculation that had nothing to do with law. Just the plain arithmetic of what the next 10 minutes would cost relative to what the compact would recover from one small child's 11 years of labor. He left. He filed a formal protest with the CSA. The CSA adjudicator reviewed the ward declaration and the compact's indenture code and issued a finding, 6 weeks later, that debt transfer to a minor dependent was not enforceable under Frontier Protection Statute, and that the indenture balance was discharged on grounds of humanitarian exception. The compact appealed. The appeal is still pending. These things take time. The child told me her name in the 2nd week. It took me 4 attempts to pronounce it correctly. She corrected me. Each time with the patience of someone who had long experience with people who could not manage the tonal register of Velhari, and on the 4th attempt, when I finally got it close enough, she made a sound that I think was laughter. She has been here a year now. She is learning the trade pigeon faster than I learned it. She sits with me on long shifts when I let her, and she has opinions about how I organize the salvage bay that are, I will admit, mostly correct. She still has the stone figure. She keeps it on the shelf above her bunk. It's the bunk I built for her in the side room, where she sleeps, with the door open, because she does not yet like closed spaces, and I do not make. People have asked me what I thought I was doing. That first hour, when I closed the door on Solvith's paperwork, I am not sure I thought anything in particular. She had hold of my fingers. I was not going to make her let go. That is all. That is the whole of it. She needed somewhere to hold on, and I was standing there, and I did not move. I have not moved since.